The storm tears through the night like a living thing. Lightning splits the sky, thunder shakes the ground, and the wind howls against the aging fences of the small-town animal sanctuary. Inside, the animals stir, nervous, restless, sensing something's wrong, and then, with a groan of metal and a crash of splintering wood, it happens. The gorilla's enclosure collapses. Baraka, a massive silverback, hurls his weight against the weakened gate. Chains snap, hinges rip free. In one violent surge, he's loose. Sirens wail within minutes. Sanctuary staff sprint through the storm, radios crackling as their worst nightmare unfolds. "The gorilla's out," one voice shouts. Panic spreads from the sanctuary to the town within seconds. Lights flicker on in houses. Doors slam shut. Cars swerve and peel away from the main road. Parents yank children indoors. But not everyone runs. A mile away, in a quiet neighborhood, Margaret Ellis, 78 years old, hears the chaos from her porch. Wrapped in her shawl, she steadies herself with her cane, frowning at the commotion. The neighbors dash past her gate, shouting warnings. "Get inside, Margaret! There's a gorilla on the loose." But she doesn't move. She doesn't run. Instead, she takes a slow, deliberate step down her porch. Her cane taps against the wet pavement as she steadies her frail frame. Her cloudy eyes narrow against the rain, scanning the street. Then she sees him. Baraka turns the corner, his massive silhouette illuminated by a flash of lightning. Water drips from his fur, muscles rippling beneath the downpour. His chest rises and falls with sharp, heavy breaths. His dark eyes blaze with wild confusion. Every instinct in the onlookers screams danger. Gasps ripple through the crowd gathered at the far end of the street. Some hide behind cars, others press against windows, phones raised, recording. Police arrive, weapons drawn, voices shouting over the storm. "Stay back! Get indoors!" But Margaret doesn't. She takes another step forward, then another. Her neighbors scream her name. "Margaret, are you mad? He'll kill you." Officers motion frantically, urging her back. But the elderly woman doesn't falter. Her frail figure looks impossibly small against the towering beast advancing down the street. Baraka's steps shake the ground. He lowers onto his knuckles, posture shifting, chest rumbling with deep, guttural sounds. His nostrils flare, catching the scent of fear in the air. But Margaret isn't afraid. She stops in the middle of the street, raindrops streaking down her silver hair. She steadies her breathing, lifts her chin, and whispers so softly no one else can hear. "It's all right." The gorilla halts. His massive form looms only yards away, steam rising from his breath in the cold night air. The storm rages around them, sirens blaring, people screaming, rain hammering the earth. Yet in that moment, time seems to stop. An elderly woman, a wild gorilla, facing each other in the storm, and neither one turns away. The rain pours harder, bouncing off pavement and pooling in the street, but Margaret Ellis doesn't move. Her neighbors, huddled in doorways, can hardly breathe as they watch her stand her ground against a creature that could crush her in a heartbeat. "Get back!" an officer shouts through the megaphone, his voice trembling. Two others raise tranquilizer rifles, fingers twitching on the triggers. The crowd buzzes with fear. "He'll charge!" someone cries. "She's going to die." But Margaret's frail figure stays rooted in place. Her cane presses into the soaked asphalt as she steadies herself. Her lips part, and her words are soft, almost drowned by the storm. "It's all right, Baraka. You don't have to be afraid." At the sound of her voice, the gorilla's chest heaves. Baraka pounds the ground once with his fists, a sound that echoes like thunder. The crowd gasps. A woman screams. An officer whispers, "We've got to take the shot." "Hold!" another sanctuary worker yells, throwing out his arm to stop them. His eyes are locked on Margaret. "Wait, just wait." Baraka shifts his weight, his nostrils flaring as he studies the elderly woman. Every instinct screams that this is the moment, the explosion, the attack, the tragedy. And yet, it doesn't come. Instead, the gorilla slows. His snarls fade into low, heavy breaths. Rain runs in rivulets down his dark fur as he drops onto all fours, his towering frame still dwarfing Margaret, but his movements measured. Margaret takes a single step forward. Gasps ripple through the crowd. "She's insane," someone whispers. But her hand doesn't shake. Her gaze doesn't falter. She lifts her chin as if meeting an old friend. The gorilla's eyes meet hers. The silence is unbearable. Neighbors press hands to their mouths. Officers grip their rifles tighter. A child sobs into his mother's coat. The entire street is holding its breath, waiting for the violence that seems inevitable. But Margaret doesn't flinch. She doesn't scream. She doesn't run. Instead, she speaks again, her voice calm, steady, almost maternal. "It's all right. I know you." And somehow, impossibly, Baraka stops. The massive silverback tilts his head, droplets of rain flicking from his fur. His breath comes slower now, no longer sharp and frantic. His hands unclench, no longer curled into weapons. Margaret lowers her cane, freeing one trembling hand. Slowly, deliberately, she raises it into the air, palm open. She's not challenging him, she's offering. The crowd is frozen in disbelief. Police exchange frantic whispers. One sanctuary worker mutters, "This isn't possible." But none of them dare to interrupt. In the middle of a storm-ravaged street, a 78-year-old woman and a 400-pound gorilla face one another in perfect stillness. It's no longer a scene of panic. It's a standoff of trust, the kind no one watching will ever forget. The rain beats down like drums, but Margaret Ellis doesn't blink. Her frail hand, pale and trembling, hangs in the air between herself and the towering gorilla. The crowd holds its breath, eyes locked on a moment that teeters between miracle and tragedy. Baraka lowers his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he exhales. The sound is deep, resonant, almost mournful. His massive shoulders rise and fall as though carrying the weight of the storm itself. Then slowly, so slowly, he takes one step forward. Screams ripple through the onlookers. An officer yells, "Take the shot!" But a sanctuary worker slams his hand on the rifle. "Don't! Look at him!" Baraka does not lunge. He does not roar. He lowers himself onto his knuckles, the rain dripping from his silvered fur, and stops just feet from Margaret. The world narrows to the space between them. Margaret's heart pounds against her ribs, but her eyes remain steady. She whispers, "There you are." Her hand inches closer, deliberate and unhurried, as though she's reaching for a frightened child, and then contact. Her palm presses gently against the thick fur of his forearm. Warm, solid, real. Gasps explode from the crowd, cameras flash wildly, but Margaret doesn't notice. Her eyes are locked on Baraka's. The gorilla exhales again, softer this time. His massive body shudders, but not with rage, with release. Slowly he shifts his weight and lowers himself even further, sitting on the wet pavement before her. A 400-pound giant, yielding. Margaret strokes his arm with the same tenderness she once used to calm her own children after nightmares. "It's all right," she whispers, rain running down her cheeks. "You're safe now." Baraka's chest rises and falls in slow rhythm. His hands, capable of snapping branches in half, rest motionless at his side. His gaze softens, his lips parting in a low grunt. It isn't aggression, it's recognition. The onlookers are spellbound. Neighbors clutch one another, tears streaming down their faces. Police lower their rifles, uncertain whether they're witnessing courage, madness, or a miracle. One boy whispers, "She's petting him." Margaret leans closer, ignoring the storm, ignoring the fear. She places her forehead briefly against his arm in a gesture of quiet trust. Baraka doesn't move away. He doesn't resist. He simply sits there, the storm crashing around them, as though the two of them exist in a different world. For a few precious minutes, chaos is silenced. There is no escaped animal, no screaming crowd, just an old woman and a gorilla bound by something no one else can explain. When Margaret finally pulls her hand back, Baraka doesn't rise. He stays seated, watching her with eyes that no longer blaze with panic. Instead, they hold something else, something human. The storm hasn't ended, but the danger has. And for everyone watching, one truth has just shattered the impossible. A wild gorilla trusted her. The storm begins to ease, thunder rolling farther away, but the street remains hushed. Margaret Ellis stands inches from the gorilla, rain dripping from her shawl, her hand still resting lightly against his fur. The crowd is frozen, too stunned to move. Then, from behind the police barricade, a sanctuary worker breaks through. His name is Daniel Ross, one of the few who has worked with Baraka since his arrival years ago. His chest heaves as he pushes past officers, his eyes wide, not with fear, but with dawning recognition. "No," he whispers almost to himself, "it can't be." Margaret turns her head slightly, still keeping her calm gaze on the silverback. "He's not going to hurt me," she says softly. "I know him." Daniel swallows hard, his mind racing, and then the truth clicks. "Margaret, you were here. You were one of the first volunteers when Baraka was rescued, weren't you?" Gasps ripple through the crowd. Margaret doesn't answer right away, but the silence is answer enough. Years ago, decades even, Margaret had spent countless afternoons at the sanctuary, not as a scientist, not as a keeper, but as a quiet, steady presence, a woman who brought patience, gentleness, and kindness to frightened animals that had known only trauma. Baraka had been just a young gorilla then, wild-eyed, skittish, torn from his troop after poachers struck. He had trusted no one, except Margaret. She had been the one who sat outside his enclosure, reading aloud so he could hear a voice that carried no threat. The one who hummed softly when he pressed against the fence at night. The one who brought bananas and set them just inside the gate, never rushing him, never forcing contact. Daniel's voice cracks as he steps closer, pointing at the scene unfolding. He remembers her. After all these years, he still remembers. The weight of his words hits the crowd like lightning. Neighbors exchange stunned looks, parents clutch children closer, officers lower their weapons completely. It wasn't madness that kept Margaret standing still. It wasn't luck that spared her from Baraka's power. It was memory. It was recognition. It was trust earned long ago and never forgotten. Margaret strokes Baraka's arm again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, old friend." The gorilla lets out a low, rumbling sound, a sound not of rage, but of comfort. He lowers himself even more, pressing his massive frame closer to the earth, as though bowing before her. His eyes close briefly, the storm's fury finally fading from his body. The sanctuary staff stand in awe, tears mixing with the rain on their faces. Daniel's voice shakes. All this time, we thought he'd forgotten those early days. But he didn't. He never forgot. The elderly woman and the gorilla remain in the center of the street, framed by broken fences, flashing sirens, and stunned silence. But for them, the world has narrowed to something much smaller, much simpler. Two souls reunited after years apart. One human, one beast, and a bond stronger than fear, stronger than time. The storm has passed, but the memory of what just happened lingers like thunder in everyone's chest. Margaret Ellis steps back slowly, her cane steady in one hand, the other sliding gently from the gorilla's arm. Baraka doesn't lunge, doesn't roar, doesn't resist. He rises with measured strength, casting one last look at her before sanctuary workers move carefully into position. With soft calls and cautious gestures, they guide him back toward the transport vehicle. He goes willingly, still glancing back, as though reluctant to leave the woman he clearly remembered. When the gate finally slams shut behind him, the crowd erupts, not in screams, but in cheers and sobs. Neighbors rush to Margaret, wrapping her in blankets, clutching her trembling hands. Police lower their weapons, some wiping rain and tears from their faces. Phones buzz as video footage spreads like wildfire. By morning, millions will have seen it. An elderly woman refusing to run as a guerrilla approached and living to tell the story. Reporters swarm the sanctuary within hours. "Why didn't you run?" one demands. Margaret only smiles, her eyes distant with memory. "Because running was never the answer," she says softly. "He wasn't angry, he was scared. And I knew he needed to see a familiar face." Clips of her words play on every network. Headlines ignite the internet. Grandmother calms escaped guerrilla with a single touch. A bond beyond species, Margaret and Baraka. Kindness remembered decades later. Wildlife experts debate furiously. Some insist it was a fluke, a miracle of timing. Others argue it was proof of guerrilla memory, intelligence, and emotional depth. But for the millions watching, the science hardly matters. What matters is the image burned into their minds, a fragile old woman standing fearlessly before raw power, and the raw power kneeling to her instead. Days later, the sanctuary honors Margaret at a community gathering. Daniel Ross, the longtime worker, presents her with a framed photograph. Margaret and Baraka in the street, rain pouring down, her hand on his arm. "This," Daniel says, voice breaking, "is what compassion looks like." The crowd rises to its feet. Tears stream freely. Margaret bows her head, humbled by the attention. "I only did what I've always done," she murmurs. "I showed him kindness. Animals remember that. People do too." In the weeks that follow, donations pour into the sanctuary. Letters arrive from around the world. Children draw pictures of Margaret and Baraka together, taped proudly to the sanctuary walls. For many, she becomes a living symbol, not of strength in muscle, but of strength in heart. Baraka returns to his enclosure, calmer than ever. Each time Margaret visits, he comes to the edge of the fence, pressing close, watching her with soft eyes. The staff no longer doubts what they witnessed. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't madness. It was love remembered. And as Margaret sits quietly by the fence one evening, Cain resting at her side, she whispers the same words she spoke that stormy night. "It's all right." Baraka exhales, a deep, rumbling sound of peace. And for everyone who saw their story unfold, one truth remains undeniable. Sometimes the strongest bond in the world is the one that never needed words. Some stories remind us that strength isn't measured in muscle, but in courage, patience, and love. When everyone else ran, Margaret Ellis stood still. When the world expected violence, a guerrilla chose peace. And in one unforgettable moment, decades of kindness came full circle. Baraka didn't see an enemy. He saw the woman who once sat by his side. He remembered. What does that say about us? About the bonds we share with creatures we so often underestimate? If this story moved you, if you believe animals carry memories of love and compassion, please like, share, and subscribe for more true animal stories that reveal just how connected we really are. Tell us in the comments. Would you have stood your ground like Margaret? And do you believe animals can remember kindness even after decades? Because sometimes the most powerful language in the world is kindness itself.